light, rich, tender, airy, and I hate using this word, but it is moist, with a silky smooth buttercream frosting. This is the ultimate birthday cake. We've all been there. You've got to make a birthday cake. You could splurge on a custom cake. It'll set you back a few $100s. You could get it from the grocery store, or you can make it. Why not make it the best birthday cake you possibly can? I'm gonna take you back to my pastry school and bakery days. We're gonna make a super awesome cake using the reverse creaming method. We're gonna make a silky smooth Swiss buttercream frosting. And finally, I'm gonna show you how to layer it and frost it like a pro so it looks like something that came out of a fancy bakery. I promise it's gonna be a ton of fun. Let's get after it. We're gonna start by sifting the dries, and then we're gonna incorporate some fat. Then we're gonna incorporate the yolks. Finally, some hot milk to emulsify the whole mixture, and then we're gonna fold in a whipped meringue to aerate it before baking. We gotta prep some cake pans. So this makes 3 layers. I'm gonna take a little bit of baking spray, nonstick spray, just a small layer here, and I'm gonna brush it on the bottom just to distribute it evenly. And then we're gonna come in with a parchment round. This is an 8-inch round. You can buy these or you can trace them out and cut them yourself. Should fit nice and snug. As far as the sides go, I'm leaving them bare. And there's a reason for that. I actually want this cake batter to climb up the sides of the cake pan as it's baking. That's gonna maximize rise. I just found that if I was greasing and flouring the sides, yeah, it was releasing really well, but I was getting these sloped sides. And so if you want those nice square edges, it's important to just leave it bare. So I'm just gonna continue brushing, and those are our 3 pans. Let's move on to the dries. There are a few key ingredients here. We're using bleached cake flour because it has a lower pH. It's gone through a chlorination process. It has a lot of qualities that make it great for baking cakes. So next, we've got some salt, some baking powder, and something called glycerol monosterate. It's an ingredient that you see often in boxed cake mix. I'm also including a little bit of baking powder here, and that's to ensure added rise and aid in some expansion. Last thing, some sugar. So this is much more sugar in this cake than flour. We want it for flavor, for sure, but it also improves the shelf life. But you want to give it a good 30 seconds to get everything super well distributed. We're gonna start incorporating our fats, and this is the reverse creaming part of the whole situation. Now, reverse creaming just simply implies instead of creaming the fats first, then adding your liquids, and finally your flour, you're just reversing that process. We actually want to start by getting some butter melted. Second thing is I'm gonna separate eggs. I'm gonna separate the yolks from the whites. Let's give a check on our butter. We also have a little bit of oil here. It's equal parts butter and oil, 100 grams of butter, 100 grams of oil, which is actually a lot for this amount of cake. So this is part of that high ratio concept. We're incorporating a lot of fat, and that's gonna give us moisture, richness. I'm getting this sort of like smooth, homogeneous paste going. We're gonna incorporate our yolks and our vanilla here. Up till this point, things have been pretty chill. You can sort of leave things, but after this point, you gotta give it your full attention. The sequence of events is really important. The mixing is really important. You gotta go straight from mixing to baking from here on out. We've got our egg whites, we've got our sugar mixture. I'm gonna load this in and we let it rip. So I'm looking for a foamy sort of texture before I incorporate the sugar, purely because I find that it incorporates a little bit better. In my experience, just gives you a more stable meringue versus just dumping everything first. Start to bump the speed slightly. I'm gonna start adding the sugar. A little bit at a time. Start to jack up the speed. I haven't taken this to a true stiff peak. A medium peak incorporates better into this batter. If you think about it from a more chemical perspective or a science perspective, whisking is a method of cooking, right? You're adding energy, friction to the eggs, and so you're effectively cooking them. So by doing less work, you're supplying less energy for down the line baking to supply more energy So we're ready to continue with our batter. We're gonna emulsify some hot milk into our paste. Now I'm gonna bring this up to about 200 degrees. Our milk is heated, it's ready to go. I'm just gonna go right in. And then I start whisking. At first, it doesn't look like much, right? Kind of feels like it's not really gonna come together. But as things get incorporated, it's starting to loosen up, yeah? It's starting to come together into a really nice, smooth batter. This is our emulsified batter. We're gonna take this a step further by adding some air, some lightness. So we're ready to finish off this batter and bake it. So we have to fold in our meringue. And at this point, I should say, you really gotta go. You gotta go from folding to dividing and baking. As you can see in this bowl here, all that baking powder has been activated, so you see like little bubbles. That's because we're using double acting baking powder. It acts 30% first when it's hydrated. The other 70% happens in the oven with heat. So let's take about a third of our meringue, and then we're just incorporating. At this point, I'm not really folding. I'm just kind of working it into the batter. I'm really just looking to get these two things more or less the same consistency. So I leave it streaky. That's fine. And as far as folding goes, I'm gonna go down the middle and then come around. Turn the bowl, down the middle, come around. And I'm making sure to get from the bottom. All right, so it's been about, I'd say 30 folds. I wouldn't want to keep folding and folding and folding forever. There's a point at which things will start to deflate, but overall, it's smooth, it's ready to go. Now we're ready to divide this batter and then bake it. So it's about 340-ish grams of batter per tin. There might be some variance there if your eggs are bigger. The good news is this recipe works regardless of the egg size that you use. So I'm tearing this. We have our prepared pans. I'm just going straight in. Before these go into bake, we're just gonna give them a light tap. And that pops any large bubbles. These are gonna bake in a 350-degree oven for about 28 to 32 minutes until they're golden brown on top. They're super flat and level. All right, let's check in our bake. Toothpick, super clean. So let's evaluate the bake. There was some doming that occurred, right? But it's since receded. So it has this nice flat layer, which is great for a layer cake. That means we don't have to do as much trimming off the top. We have some contraction, some shrinkage from the sides. That means that the cake has fully baked. And if I also just lightly press, I can feel that it's baked through. It's not like jiggly or anything. At the end of the day, this is an assembly exercise, right? So you just want all your layers to be well baked and sturdy. So I'm happy with this. We're gonna let these cool for at least 30 minutes before we unmold them. And then we're gonna chill them down even further before trimming and assembling. All right, so our cakes have cooled for about 30 minutes. They're ready to unmold. I've got a flat spatula and I'm just gonna run it around the cake, being careful not to puncture through the cake, just go around this inner rim. I'm pressing against the pan and I'm rotating. It might take a few turns to really get things to release. All right, let's see if this goes. There's your guy. At this point, we're gonna pop these into the freezer to really firm up before we trim them. Now we're on to trimming our cakes. They're nice and cold, so at this point, I'm just gonna remove the parchment. And when I remove, I wanna go close to the surface. I have a cutting board set on a cake wheel or a cake turner. This is what it looks like on the good side, but I'm gonna focus on this crummy side first. And I'm gonna be trimming the outermost 1 or 2 millimeters of this cake. And that's primarily to square the sides, but also to get rid of this sort of crummy part. So I'm just gonna go very methodically, just come through and just trim. And if you've ever like supremed an orange, this is pretty much exactly that. And I'm not taking off a lot. It's like 1 mil, maybe 2. And I'm exposing the tender white part of the cake. And so the cleaner it starts, the cleaner it ends up being. Now we gotta address the top. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It's pretty flat. If I were to put a level here, that's telling me it's not level, so I need to actually trim some from this angle. If I'm over here, it's actually quite level. So on one axis, we need to address a little bit. So I'm back here and I'm actually eyeballing things. So I'm just running my knife and I'm keeping the cake wheel pretty centered and I'm just keeping it stable. I'm not applying a ton of pressure or wiggling my knife or anything. I'm just trying to keep it straight. Pretty good for me. Well, remember, we're going to be frosting this whole thing and there's going to be frosting between layers, so we don't have to worry too much. I'm going to repeat that with the other two. Throw them back into the freezer for, say, at least 15 minutes, maybe up to half an hour again, and then we're going to get to building. As the name implies, a Swiss buttercream or Swiss meringue buttercream uses a Swiss meringue. It's one of 3 common types of meringues. There's French meringue, there's Italian meringue, and then there's Swiss meringue, where you cook everything together to a specific temperature range that dissolves all the sugar, and then you're able to whip it up. As far as stability, it's in the middle ground, but it is also the densest, and it gives a really nice, silky, smooth buttercream, and it's super easy to put together. All right, so let's make our Swiss meringue. There are a number of ways to make Swiss meringue. A very common one is to cook it over a bain-marie. So I'm gonna take egg whites straight into a bowl here, a whole bunch of sugar. We have some salt. We also have cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is an acid, so lemon juice, vinegar, things like that are added to meringues to stabilize them because it partially denatures the proteins. They kind of unfold so that they don't stick together as much, and so you get a taller, more stable meringue. Cream of tartar would be helpful in, say, a French meringue where you're not cooking anything. But because we're cooking things, we're also denaturing the proteins with heat. So the cream of tartar might be redundant here, but for me, it's a little added insurance, can't hurt. So we've got all of our ingredients in this bowl. Just gonna give a good whisk, just getting this nice and well mixed before it goes over the heat. We don't want the sides of this pan, of this pot, to be too hot. Otherwise, it's gonna cook the egg whites on the rim of the bowl a bit prematurely, and we'd get chunks. So I don't really wanna do that. I want gentle heat. That's pretty good. Let's get our water up. Bring this to a bare simmer, not ripping hot. Go over, start the timer. And I'm just gonna be whisking very gradually, but steadily. I'm not exactly looking to incorporate a ton of air at this point. That's what the stand mixer is for. At this point, I'm looking to dissolve all the sugar and partially denature the proteins. And you'll see that happen as the graininess goes away, the grittiness goes away, but you'll also see that the mixture here turns more opaque, turns more white. That's an indicator that stuff is cooking. So this process is gonna take anywhere from 10 to 12 minutes. Depending on your heat level, the size of your pot, say, the thickness, the gauge of your bowl that you're using. So really the best indicator here is to go by temperature. Found that around 170, 175 gave us really good results. All right, so at the 9:30 mark, we have reached 175. All right, our egg whites are cooked, they're denatured, they're ready to whip. I take the extra step of actually straining the whites because I found that invariably, if you're really impatient, you might get some scrambled white chunks. So I'm just scraping the rest through. I should note that Swiss buttercream is very flexible. Because you've got a ton of butter and a ton of meringue, it's a very stable emulsion. It can withstand some variance in the amount, is what I'm trying to say. So this amount of foam that we're leaving out, potentially, not gonna be a problem. What I will do is make sure that I'm scraping the bottom here. And I made sure to clean off my spatula. I wiped it on the rim before I did that. So we're ready to whip, start it off. See some steam already, right? As this whips, it's going to cool down. And we're actually looking to cool this down to around 90 Fahrenheit. That's gonna take around 8 to 10 minutes, and we'll temp it throughout just to make sure. So I'm gonna stop here for a second just to show you guys. It looks like it's coming together as a meringue, but it's still quite warm. So we need to temp it, and we're still at around 100 degrees. I'm looking for around 90, maybe slightly lower. The bulk of this work at this point is to cool it down. All right, Let's check one more time. 9, 90. Perfect. At this point, we're gonna incorporate our butter. The most important thing here is actually the temperature of the butter. I've left it out overnight at room temperature. If it's too cold, then you're gonna have a pretty lumpy buttercream. But if it is too hot, like too warm, then you're just gonna have more of a soupy buttercream situation, in which case you need to cool things down. So around 65 degrees Fahrenheit is optimal. You can go 1 or 2 pads at a time. I'm just looking for each addition of butter to get emulsified. So I'm really starting to see that it's very soupy at this point. And at this point, I'd be like, oh, that's not buttercream. But we're gonna keep adding butter. It'll tighten back up, and then it'll get really, really smooth. And our last 1 or 2 tablespoons straight in is a good example. Looks curdled. That's a good indicator that things are headed in the right direction, getting really emulsified. It only means that we gotta keep going. Now, I could stand here all day and let the friction do its thing and really get things to emulsify further, but if I wanted to speed this along, a very common hack, common trick, is to use a blowtorch. Literally, all I'm gonna do is flash the sides, and that's to release some of the buttercream from the sides and to help supply a little bit more energy so that things really get going, really emulsify and smooth out. All right. Now this is ready to flavor and color if you so choose. To finish this setup, we need to trim our cake round. I'm just gonna be taking maybe just short of 1 centimeter off. And this is really so that when I go to frost the cake, the cardboard isn't getting in the way at all. It's a little less than flush with the actual cake, which is perfect. So just to anchor this cardboard, we're gonna wet a paper towel and just gonna lay it there. Pretty snug, it's not really gonna go anywhere. Let's get to making our soaking liquid. Now, why do we soak a cake? It keeps the cake moist. That's especially true for really dry cakes. People use it often as a crutch. But because our cake is really moist to begin with, we don't need to soak it so much for that. We're soaking it just for a little bit more moisture, but honestly just to accentuate some more flavor. So I'm actually gonna add some liqueur. The flavor from the orange liqueur is gonna be really, really nice. It's nice and floral, citrusy, because why not? Let us move on to our frosting. This is tempered Swiss buttercream. It's freshly made. We just need to snip it, size that up. I'm gonna pipe down maybe 2 teaspoons, and that will anchor our cake. That's pretty well centered. Then we'll go along with our soak. You can soak as much or as little as you want here. And grab a scale. Place my piping bag on the scale, tear it, and so when I pipe out, I'm gonna be able to tell how much I piped out. As far as this goes, I'm looking for around 200 grams. Well, starting at the rim, just moving along, just like that. We got a nice rim of frosting. And then we're gonna move in, see where we're at. 128, we got 70 to go, more or less. So I'll set this guy aside for a second. I could go ahead and put that layer on, call it a day. But in the interest of having really even layers of buttercream, we gotta smooth it out a little bit. So I have a large offset here. The way I'm holding the offset spatula is really important. That's where my index finger goes, and that's how I control the pressure of the offset spatula. You know, I dictate the direction with my wrist, but the pressure comes from my index finger. And at this point, I'm going to rotate the wheel, keeping the offset spatula in place, and that will smooth out the layer. And that's pretty good. So at this point, we're ready for our next layer, and we'll repeat. You don't have to be perfect at this stage because we're gonna crumb coat it. We're gonna fill these spaces with frosting, and so we'll have an even layer. Ready to crumb coat. I should talk about the stages of frosting a cake. So after you've built it, you need to crumb coat it, apply a final coat, and then you finally can decorate it. The crumb coat is really to lock in all of these crumbs and to provide a foundation for the final coat. It's gonna cover any of these crevices, any holes, things like that. It's gonna start to give us the overall shape of the cake. At this point, I am going to dispense a little buttercream on the sides. I'm just trying to lay it onto the cake. All right, as far as this goes, I'm gonna start with the top. It's really a thin layer of buttercream. You don't need it to be like really chunky. And then I'm gonna work along the sides here. Once I have everything pretty well covered, I can start smoothing it a little more with my offset spatula. And that's a different motion than what I've been using. So I'm just taking a look, seeing if there's any spots that are like sort of missing and just patching anything up. So at this point, we're gonna follow with a different motion. This is smoothing. So I'm gonna turn the cake wheel and keep the offset spatula in place. Now we're gonna move on to our cake smoother. And this is gonna help us get some straighter edges. You wanna be holding this at a roughly 45-degree angle. You also need to hold it with 3 or 4 fingers like this. So it's really stable on the cake wheel. What you're doing is you're holding it in place, and then you're gonna be turning. You're turning toward the scraper, toward the smoother, and that's the amount of frosting that you're taking off each time. It's not a lot. I'm not applying a ton of pressure. I'm just keeping it firmly on the cake wheel and letting the wheel do the work. Now I'm looking at the top edge. I'm seeing if there's any areas where I need to fill in anything. I'm pretty much there. You can still see shades of the cake underneath. That is perfectly fine. That's what a crumb coat is for. So to finish this off, we are gonna come in and swoop. I liken the motion to an airplane. A lot of chefs will say that. So you come in level, swoop in. And as far as this, I'm pretty happy. So at this point, this is going to chill in the freezer for at least 15 minutes, if not longer, to really firm up the frosting before we apply the final coat. So this is plenty cold. This is ready to frost. I've got another piping bag loaded up. Take your time, go line by line. Whoop. If you make a mistake like I just did there, it's okay, you can pick up right there. I am looking for a nice little lip over the top. That's gonna be important later. And then I'm just gonna come in on top. Now I've temped this frosting out to around 75 degrees. It's nice and smooth and workable. So good for what I need. Once I'm more or less happy with the top, I will move on to the sides. I'm just looking to get it level at this point. That's pretty level. All right, now with my palette knife, I'm just going back and forth. What I'm doing here is actually applying enough pressure to where I'm evening out any air gaps. And I've got a little bit excess here. I can use it if I want to cover up any patches. So on the bottom here. Now, once I'm more or less happy with the overall shape and there's no large air gaps happening, I can start working with my cake smoother. 4 o'clock position, just moving through. I'm pretty happy with this. At this point, I'm going to start with the final smoothing process. For that, we apply a little bit of heat. That can come in the form of a blowtorch, or you can dip it in hot water. This is probably the most approachable method. It's much smoother. One of the hardest things to do when you're doing this final coat is knowing when to call it quits. It's the hardest thing. Like for me, the hardest thing for sure. If you have some slight imperfections or anything like that going on, best to just live with it. If most of the cake looks really good, then just move on with your life. It's all right. It's still gonna taste great. All right, I'll give one more pass. I'll show you one technique that actually this is instructive. So I've got a heated blade. Another way to do this is to come around and just go slow. And that gets you a really smooth edge. So the final step is to take care of this top. Same deal as a crumb coat, like you're landing an airplane. Wheels up, swoop. The final coat has been applied. This is a blank canvas. We are ready to decorate. I've opted for just some piping, but you can get as crazy as you want with this. If you are really into piping, intricate designs, you can pipe little flowers across the side or on the bottom, definitely on the top. I'm just gonna go for a very simple design. I'm just gonna go across the rim. So I'm really just piping, very similar to like pot au choux, piping, stopping, releasing. So I have a little bigger spot there. I'm just gonna fill it, just like that. At this point, pretty happy with that. If you wanted to, you could add some sprinkles, go crazy. But as far as frosting goes, this is finished and decorated. So it's ready to serve. This is on our cake wheel. In a real life situation, we are going to be transferring it off the cake wheel. So a useful thing is to know how to do it. Before you do this, I would advise chilling the cake, but you can also do it once you've pretty much frosted it. And so I'm coming from the back, from the seam, and I'm just gonna slide straight under, trying to catch underneath the cardboard. I'm just sliding, and I'm picking up and lifting. Nailed it. Come out, slide it through. Last thing, it's helpful to have a hot knife. I'll dip it in some hot water, warm it up, and just go down the middle. How big of a slice do you want? Hopefully he comes out. I'm looking at the frosting levels, so in each layer, is there an even amount of frosting? The answer is yes. And in fact, it's pretty consistent from edge to edge. So the outside edge, good amount of frosting. Inside, it's pretty similar amount. Yeah, so let's taste it. That is excellent. It's really, really good. The cake is incredibly moist, rich, but it still has that airy quality because we went to all that extra effort to mix a unique hybrid cake with the chiffon and that high ratio method. The frosting, it's got a lot of flavor, and the ratio of things, most importantly, is correct. It's proper. So there's not too much frosting with each bite. So I feel like we went on an entire journey making an ultimate birthday cake. If you've got the time, you have the willpower, and a little bit of patience, this cake can be yours. I've got a really easy sheet cake, also equally delicious and like a tenth of the effort and time and work. And yeah, go check that out.
Subscribe to our channel and visit ChefSteps.com for more tips, recipes, guides, and tools to help you level up in the kitchen.